Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Have you ever thought about who Harry Potter's father really was? What if I told you he wasn't the perfect hero many imagine him to be? In today's video, you will find out the shocking truth about James Potter. For Harry, his parents were always a shining ideal, almost like angels in human form. And it makes sense. A boy who lost his family as a baby would naturally idealize them, especially growing up in a home where he was unloved and mistreated by the Dursleys. But what happens if we step away from childhood admiration and look at James Potter objectively? His mother, Lily, was kind-hearted and selfless, but James, he was far from a saint.
Why do I say this? Let me prove it to you.
James Potter was born into a wealthy, respected wizarding family. Unlike the Malfoys or the Blacks, the Potters weren't obsessed with blood purity, but they still valued their lineage. James, however, broke tradition by marrying Lily, a Muggle-born witch, something his ancestors never did. At Hogwarts, James became a Gryffindor, excelling in Quidditch and surrounding himself with a close-knit group of friends, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. He was popular, talented, and full of confidence. He passed his exams effortlessly, relying more on natural ability than hard work. After Hogwarts, he and his friends joined the Order of the Phoenix, fighting against Voldemort. He faced the Dark Lord multiple times, always escaping with his life, until the fateful night when Voldemort came for his son. That night, James was the first to fall. But was he really the noble hero everyone remembers? The truth is, James Potter had flaws that cannot be ignored. He was a troublemaker. At school, James and his friends were notorious pranksters. They caused mischief, spied on classmates, and pulled stunts that often went too far. Even Lily found him arrogant and immature at first. He was arrogant. James took pride in his skills and pure-blood heritage. He never had to struggle for anything, and he wasn't shy about reminding others of that. He even mocked Vernon Dursley, Lily's sister's husband, for his Muggle interests. He bullied Severus Snape. And here's the biggest stain on his legacy, the relentless bullying of Severus. James humiliated him in front of the entire school, knowing full well that Severus was deeply in love with Lily. James Potter may have been a talented wizard and a devoted husband, but his actions during his school years left a dark stain on his legacy. His arrogance, his bullying, and his reckless behavior paint a far more complicated picture than the heroic figure many believe him to be. His most infamous moments at Hogwarts revolved around Severus Snape. Their rivalry was well known, but it was James who took it to an extreme. He would publicly humiliate Snape, hex him for fun, and once even went as far as hanging him upside down in front of the entire school. Snape, humiliated and helpless, had no choice but to endure. And James did all of this knowing that Severus had feelings for Lily. Some say he saw Snape as a threat, while others argue that he simply enjoyed making his life miserable. Either way, his actions were not those of a noble hero. What's even more telling is how James' friends reacted. Sirius, always up for trouble, encouraged him. Peter, eager to stay in their good graces, laughed along. But Remus, he stayed silent. He never stopped them, never spoke against it. But his guilt was clear in later years. If even someone as close to James as Remus felt uneasy about his behavior, what does that say about the kind of person James really was? Even Lily wasn't impressed. She saw through his charm and confidence, calling him an arrogant tow-rag when they were younger. James had to change, had to prove he could be better before she even considered him as anything more than an annoyance. That alone suggests he wasn't always the golden boy people imagine. He had to grow up first. But how much did he really change? It's true that by the time he married Lily, he had left much of his schoolyard bullying behind. He became a father, a fighter against Voldemort, a man willing to die to protect his family. That's admirable, without question, and yet there are still moments that raise doubt about his true character. Take his relationship with Sirius. They were inseparable, almost like brothers, but their shared arrogance sometimes blinded them to their own cruelty. When Sirius wanted revenge on Snape, he played a prank so dangerous it could have ended in death. He led Snape straight to the Shrieking Shack, where Remus, transformed into a deadly werewolf, was waiting. Had James not intervened at the last second, Snape would have been killed or turned into a werewolf himself. James may have stopped it, but why did he allow things to escalate that far in the first place? Another troubling aspect of James' past is how easily he dismissed people who didn't fit his idea of what was acceptable. His mockery of Vernon Dursley wasn't just teasing, it was outright disdain for someone he saw as lesser simply because he was a Muggle. If James truly believed in equality, why did he look down on Vernon so much? His willingness to break blood purity traditions by marrying Lily suggests that he wasn't prejudiced, but moments like these hint at a lingering sense of superiority. And then there's Peter Pettigrew. James considered him a close friend, part of their inner circle, yet he either didn't see or chose to ignore Peter's weaknesses, his cowardice, his desperate need for approval. Maybe if James had paid more attention, if he had taken Peter's insecurities more seriously, things would have turned out differently. Instead, Peter betrayed him, selling out his family to Voldemort. James trusted him completely, never questioning his loyalty, and that blind faith cost him everything. In the end, James died protecting his son. There is no question that he was brave, that he loved his family, that he was willing to sacrifice himself for them. But does one heroic act erase all the harm he caused in his youth? Some will say yes. Others will argue that his past still matters. The truth is, James Potter was not a perfect man. He was complex, flawed, capable of both great love and great cruelty. He was a hero, but he was also a bully. He was a loving father, but he was also arrogant and reckless. The question isn't whether James was good or bad. It's whether his mistakes define him more than his redemption. Perhaps the real lesson here is that people are never just one thing. James wasn't purely good and he wasn't purely bad. He was human, and maybe that's what